Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Hello, and welcome to episode 57. Thanks so much for joining me. Our guests today are Victor Briere and Joe Rich, co-founders of the International Institute of Ayurveda. You may remember Victor from episodes 39 and 40, where we discussed his in-depth individualized consultations aimed at identifying the underlying root causes of wellness imbalances and how to support the body as it restores itself to health. Joe is a longtime practitioner and teacher of Kundalini yoga, has a degree in healthcare management, and a background in counseling emotionally disturbed inner-city teens, running group homes for at-risk youth, and working as an epidemiologist for the CDC. These days, Joe's goal is to assist people in applying consciousness in everyday life and transforming the love of power into the power of kindness. We cover a range of topics, including the interconnectivity between Ayurveda and yoga, the role of meditation in connecting with our inner wisdom, how intuition and surrender play a role in our wellness, and the concept of we're all one. We end this episode with Joe sharing what's lighting him up these days, including an offer he's extending to the listeners of this podcast. And as always, I'll put links to those items and Victor and Joe's contact information in the show notes. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So, Victor and Joe, welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Kathy.
Excited.
So our listeners have been introduced to Victor and know his backstory. But Joe, you have had quite a fascinating journey. Could you share a bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, for all the things I've done, I'm still so young, but no kidding. Well, for the last 22 years, I've been teaching and studying Kundalini yoga. So, and then we opened up our Ayurvedic center. So we've opened up a couple. So that's been the main focus the last 22 years. Yeah, 22 years. The Ayurveda has been just more the last 10 years. And then previous to that, way back when I was young, I worked with emotionally disturbed teenagers in various settings. And then I went and became an epidemiologist with CDC. So I worked clinics with epidemics. So I would be big right now. If I was still in the biz, I'd be working with COVID.
When I saw that in your bio, the CDC can't be more steeped in Western medicine.
There you go.
So I'm curious, what would your counsel be to them today with the Eastern perspective you now have?
Yeah. Well, actually, it was a progression. So it made me start looking for Eastern. We basically just gave out pills. I mean, we just gave out penicillin for all kinds of infections and things. That's what we were dealing with, right? Epidemics or, a lot of infections. So it was just a lot of that. It wasn't really practicing medicine, I wouldn't call it. I mean, we diagnosed and then dished out the antibiotics. So that's why I started in my own personal life. I started looking for it and read some books. This is your way back now because you're back 40 years. And started finding alternative stuff. And Ayurveda was one of it, and yoga was another. So started practicing it all on my own because there was no such thing in America back then. And
right.
Even trying to find organic foods, I became a vegan at the same time as I started all this. And just even trying to find organic foods was tough. And learned a lot. So I just kind of self-taught myself and taught myself Ayurveda at the same time. And and then as I aged, things happened. Doctors started showing up, and I met a doctor in Kauai, actually, and used him as my Ayurvedic doctor. And we're still friends to this day. And, it just kind of evolves, really.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't hard. My mind accepted it easily. My body accepted it easily. I just didn't have many resources, but now it's easy. So.
And how did the two of you meet?
Victor came into my yoga class about 11 years ago.
12 now.
12.
Yeah, I think it was 12.
And we just became, friends.
Mm-hmm. All right. The rest is history.
Yeah,
The rest is history. I was looking for a career change. I was in my 20s. I had been practicing yoga, but I had never heard of Ayurveda, which is one of the funny parts about yoga in the United States. It's yoga everywhere, or at least asana everywhere, but no mention of Ayurveda, which is like inseparable from yoga.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe was the one who introduced me to Ayurveda, and he introduced me, said, hey, check this out. And there's a documentary, if anyone's interested, called The Art of Being, which is a fabulous documentary about traditional Ayurveda. So don't think you're going to walk into an Ayurvedic clinic in the West and get that experience, but it's a very good representation of the spirit of it. And watched that, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the juice. This is where it's at.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
That documentary is cool. I mean, you gotta be in the India frame of mind when you watch that documentary. It's cool. It's fun. It's fun to watch.
It's funny. The image that just came to mind, the last time I was in Delhi, in the airport, there's a sculpture of the sun salutation, right?
Uh-huh. Yes, I know what sculpture you're talking about. Yeah.
It's the only one in the world that I've ever seen in all the airports that I've been in. It's quite striking.
Yeah.
For our audience who may have a high level understanding of some of the things that we're talking about, can you speak a bit about the interconnectivity between Ayurveda and yoga? Let's go a little bit deeper. What's important for our listeners to know?
Well, I always like to say this. It's Ayurveda was created because the yogis used to throw you out of balance. You'd go into a yoga class, and of course, the yogis back then, it wasn't all about just doing asanas and stuff. They used to mess with your head, right? Because they would try to get you to go get off your ego and your, just your way of thinking to try to open you up to a consciousness. They would throw you out of balance. They'd get your pitta too fired up. They'd get your vata too airy. They'd get your kapha, going. And so they kind of invented Ayurveda to put you back in together. So you'd go to a yoga class and you'd have to go see your Ayurvedic doctor to get you back together, So that's kind of why, that's the fun story I like to tell about it. Victor can tell you probably more of the truth, but I do find it to be true. I do find that to be true, that a yoga class with a teacher that's going to challenge you and challenge your consciousness is definitely going to upset you a little bit at times, because, you start going inward and looking inward. You find out you're not as perfect as you thought you were. And so that'll whack you out a little bit. So then here comes the Ayurvedic doctor to put you back in balance. So that's Victor's role.
It's a team effort, certainly. And there's a lot of correspondence in some of the ancient history, correspondence between yogis and Ayurvedic physicians, which were called Vaidyas back then, because remember, they didn't have to go get a certificate or anything. It was just the person who knew what they were doing. And it's like, okay, I'm going to send one of my students to you because this and this happened. It's like, great. And so there was a commingling there and an intentionality behind that about how to really help someone, not just physically, but spiritually, because at the end of the day, those two things are not separate. So it's very different than the way we look at it now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned the doshas. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Again, our listeners may be a little unaware of what that is and what that means to both yoga and to Ayurveda.
Dosha literally means that which can go out of balance. And if you go online and you type in, what's my dosha, you'll find all these quizzes.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take them.
Terrible.
They're gonna ask you to assess yourself, and inevitably you're going to assess your own imbalance. And then you're gonna come out, and your constitution at its heart is gonna be something like pitta, but you're gonna say, oh, I'm a vata. The quiz says I'm a vata. Why? Because you answered all the questions as your imbalance. So it's like, do you find that your mind races, is medium speed, or is sedentary? It's like, oh, it's racing all the time. And then at the end, it's going to say, well, you're a vata. And it's like, no, that's not true. That's your vikruti, which means imbalance. Your prakruti is your balance. So the doshas are vata, pitta, and kapha. And what those are in brief, I mean, this is a nutshell, but they're biological forces that unite our bodies with the natural forces. So vata deals with movement primarily, how anything moves in your body. Pitta deals with the transformation of one thing into another. So think stomach acid. It breaks down food so that it can be used to transform into tissue later. And then kapha deals with the growth of tissue and how tissues bond and adhere, and it creates structure and resilience. And we all have all three in our bodies playing out at all times. But we have different proportions. We're all a recipe. We have a recipe, and not everyone's created equal. So some people have more kapha, some people have more pitta, some people have more vata. And these doshas are great because they go around and they're circulating through our body at all times, and they're determining how our body is going to function with a certain type of intelligence. And they're constantly adapting to the millions of inputs in our environment at any given time. Thank God, because if we had to do that ourselves, we could never keep up. But that same adaptability makes them liable to fall out of balance. So like within yoga asana, there's a point where, oh, I'm very flexible and that's great. But if I get too much more flexible, I lose strength. And vice versa. If I'm not flexible enough, I lose flexibility and I become rigid, and then I become brittle, and then I can't bend, so I break. And the same thing's going on with these doshas. And the doshas are always seeking an equilibrium with each other inside our own body in relationship to the environment. That's why they're so important.
So there seems to be this optimal place that we just move in and out of, just like anything else in life, right? It just seems to, depending on what's going on, can influence, and depending on how we take care of ourselves, can be factors in moving either way, in balance or out of balance. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we eat influences, when we sleep influences, every thought we have influences our doshas. Our relationships influence our doshas. Everything influences the doshas, which means that everything influences our body.
Mm-hmm. Joe, getting back to some of the yoga, we've said yoga in general, but you in particular practice Kundalini yoga.
Yes.
Can you speak to the difference between Kundalini yoga and what people may think of when they hear the word yoga, the other practices?
Yeah. Well, they're very similar. I mean, the asanas are similar. The breath work, the pranayama is very similar. There's different names for the same things. Like we call breath of fire, other people call something else. It's, warrior pose, it becomes archer pose. So a lot of the stuff's the same. But here's the thing that they say, at least, is that Kundalini yoga causes your Kundalini energy to rise much quicker. It's much more focused on that particular thing. So if you're, Pittas will love Kundalini yoga because it gets you there quickly, and it's and that's what they want. That's what Pittas like. So the whole idea is to get your Kundalini to rise and stimulate your pineal gland, and open up your 10th gate, or open you up to what they've always called the bliss. That's the idea, is that to get the Kundalini to rise up to Sushumna and stimulate the pineal gland. And so the asanas that you practice and the breath work you practice and the mantras you chant and the mudras you do and all of that during Kundalini yoga class just gets it there faster. It's more stimulating than other types of yoga. So, fit your personality. That's what Victor was just talking about, your personality type. So if you like to go hard and fast, Kundalini yoga is your thing. If Hatha is a little bit better for the slower, but if that's your style, that's your style.
So yoga in general is more aligned with Ayurveda. It doesn't have to be a particular type.
Oh,
okay.
Absolutely. Yoga, the word yoga just means to yoke yourself with your divinity, to your divineness. So however you do that is how you do it, And that's ultimately where yoga is supposed to take you. I mean, it's great to have a flexible body, but it's Joseph Campbell's, hero's journey. Yoga is part of the hero's journey. It's about bringing yourself to self-awareness and consciousness. And sure, you got to have a flexible, healthy body to do all that. And that's all good. But ultimately, you know, you want to have the experience of awakening or consciousness and then return to the village and serve the village with this new awakened consciousness that you have. So, you know, the idea behind yoga was always to make you a better person so that you could serve society in a much more conscious way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a better time to be doing that than right now, because we better get ourselves together.
Mm-hmm. You speak a lot about these individual journeys, right?
Yeah.
So it's not Victor, to your point, you can't get online and take a test, and there isn't one right way, that there's all of these combinations depending on your own constitution, your needs, your imbalances.
Right.
Can you speak to the role of meditation as a way for someone to connect with their own inner wisdom, since that individual journey is so important?
Yeah. Well, you know, that's what it all comes down to. Again, the asanas were created much later on in yoga. Yoga was practiced for thousands of years without asanas. Asanas are created to set you up for a good meditation. That's what you do asanas for. So the meditation is the important part. So the depth of meditation is determined by the strength of the navel point. And so having a good navel point, so you could do Nabi Kriya, which is a set of asanas, and that'll strengthen your navel point, which will allow you to meditate more deeply. So there's the connection. Meditation is a tricky thing in this day and age, because sitting quietly with, you know, a straight spine, that's sitting in a meditative pose, but that's not meditation. The Western mind has a lot of trouble meditating because we are so agitated and our environment's very agitated. And our whole link to success is agitation, right? I work 14 hours a day. I can go. I'm sucking caffeine down. You know, all that kind of lifestyle, you're not going to be able to meditate. So to meditate, you have to change your lifestyle. And again, I'm not saying this for any reason, personal reason, but animal proteins are very stimulating. They stimulate your adrenal glands because they're very acidic, they're hard to digest. And so it makes it very hard to be in a meditative mode when you're eating those kind of foods. Victor could tell you more, like, you know, what time you eat and all that's going to be important. You definitely don't want to be ingesting caffeine or nicotine, of course. That's just totally out of the question. Any of that kind of stuff, so that your adrenal glands are down, your breath is slow and deep and all of that, and your mind is quiet. Then you go into meditation and even go deeper. So what are you looking for? Well, you know, most people are not going to experience what I was talking about earlier, where you're going to have some sense of tapping into the bliss. You're not going to have your Kundalini rise and stimulate your pineal gland. That's what the yogis were after. But you certainly could get quiet enough where you start to be able to tap in to your intuition rather than just your rational mind. The rational mind's more subject to the ego, to fear, to worries, to anxiety, whereas the intuition is often called the voice of the soul. So that would be a much better place to be living your life from and making decisions from and relating to one another and communicating with one another from. That would be a much better place. So when you then you get into the thing like Victor would with the vagus nerve, that's with the parasympathetic state. So meditation, when you want to bring yourself into a parasympathetic state, and then start dealing with the world from there. But you can't stay there, because sometimes you got to get going. You got to go do something that throws you back in your sympathetic state. So I'm not saying live your entire day in a parasympathetic or meditative space, but a couple hours a day would be nice.
How do people start to move in that direction? It feels like there's an opportunity now because the world has quieted down just a bit.
Yeah.
So what might be some first steps?
Well, certainly sit in the pose. You want to get your back straight so that the energy can rise up the spine. You said just sit in the pose and get used to it and get your body used to it, get your back muscles strong. And once you have accomplished that, then don't worry about the fact that your mind is very active. Have the thoughts and just let them pass through you as though they're water running over a rock. But don't get involved with them. Don't start thinking your thoughts. Just let them run. I would say for at the beginning, it's good to play some kind of mantra that kind of helps quiet your mind. Anything will do that as long as it satisfies you, as long as it gets you there. That's what's important. You can always use the mudras. So you want to do your mudra, your fingertips, and just get used to the feel of it. Just get used to it, and relax. Don't judge yourself. Don't get, it's not going to come that quickly. You've been living in a world that lives in the opposite direction up until now. So be patient, give yourself some time, sit in a quiet room with a little distraction or no distraction. Just get used to sitting. See what happens. And then you can start working on the breath and getting your breath down to 2 breaths a minute, 3 breaths a minute. That's pranayama. It'll all come. You'll get there. Just have fun. If it's not fun, you won't do it.
Mm. There seems to be a role of surrendering, right? As you're speaking, I'm hearing, there's this feeling of call and response, of taking action yet allowing, for Ayurveda, trying something new, but listening to how the body is taking to it.
Yeah.
What role does surrender come in all of this and learning something new like meditation?
It's pivotal, because that's a beautiful way of saying it. You've got to surrender your mind. And if you, people literally are afraid to let go of the agitated mind. They don't know what would happen to them if they quit thinking. We are addicted to our thinking, and we think that our thinking is what's keeping us safe. And we think that our thinking is what's keeping us influential in the world, That's all mental. And then, most of us make our money that way. So the thought that we'd ever become mindless and surrendered in the Western, that is tough, because surrendered is considered weak. It's considered failure. You've lost the war. I'm surrendering. And most Westerners would even use the word submit. They would say, you're submitting. No, I said surrender. Well, it's the same thing. It's like, no, it's not at all. Surrender is a choice. It's a choice to let go of the mind and risk what happens in that moment when you bring awareness to yourself, because the mind is no longer telling you what to do. Now you're free to create your own reality. The surrendered mind, when you've done the work to truly surrender the mind, and like I said, get in touch with the intuition, you can now create your own reality in relationship to what's around you. So you can start creating relationships better. You can start creating communication better. You can start definitely creating a way you make a living, be more fruitful. You can make those kind of instant changes in your life. And it all goes back to what you said. Can you surrender the mind and allow?
Yeah. I almost think about this surrendering as if you're handing the reins over for a bit.
Yeah.
I think where people may get tripped up is this idea of, well, then what do I do with my surroundings? Because there's that tension when it first starts. And you're trying to live from a different place. You're trying to live from your heart, not from your head.
Yeah.
But that's not what you've surrounded yourself with. And it takes a while to make some of those changes. And I think that's where there's that kind of 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of a feel.
You bet. I totally agree with what you're saying. And it's very difficult to live in that kind of slower, more meditative, conscious space, and then put all kinds of judgment on that. And people think success is tied to being amped up and being willing to do, twice as much work than you should to keep, that you throw yourself so out of balance, pretty soon the body starts to break down. And what's the saying, Victor, about Westerners make all their money and then spend it all the last 20 years of their lives on their health?
Yeah, they sacrifice their health to make a bunch of money so that they could retire comfortably. And then when they retire, they have to spend all the money they made recovering their health, which they never end up recovering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it in clinic every day.
Yeah, and I see a lot of times, we're getting into the deeper waters, which is great because it's necessary. But, a lot of times people, they come in with an initial impulse of a desire to heal. But when they wake up to the reality of what they would actually have to change to heal that, and it starts to threaten their intimate relationships, I see time and time again a spouse coming in and saying, "Oh, I can't do that." Why? Because my spouse will never do. They'll divorce me, and they're being serious. They're not making that up. It will create so much pressure and so much conflict in the relationship. That's like, no, thanks. I'll just keep the habit and take my chances, especially with things like alcohol and meat. The point is, if I make a change, my relationships come under threat, and am I willing to go through that change? And that's the real hard stuff that creates barriers to healing, that you got to be ready to at least attempt, because sometimes it doesn't turn out all bad and the other person gets benefited by your change. But then sometimes the fear comes true.
Yeah. Speaker Rob Bell once said it was a mentor that gave him some words of wisdom as he was getting more successful in his career. And it was something to the effect of, whenever you gain something, you lose something. That's just the way it goes, right? And so, yeah, wonderful thing, but something drops away. And I think that's the choice, whether people realize it or not. It's that intuitive choice of, I know this is going to play well or it's not, and I need to choose whether or not I want to walk down that path.
Yeah. Amen. Yes.
Definitely. And so it's not, and that's, a lot of Western medicine, we all like to say, oh, the MD did this wrong or that wrong, or the system's so messed up, which, okay, sure, there are problems with every system. But when we look at ourselves, it's like, yeah, but whether I know it or not, I'm asking for that. I'm asking for the easy pill. I'm asking for the surgery that means I don't have to change anything else about my life. And as a culture, we're asking for it. And so we're the consumer. And so someone's just supplying it.
Supply and demand.
Yep. And I think that's where a lot of deep healing can happen when we really get to that layer within ourselves. It's like, okay, how am I going to make changes on that level? Because that's what it's going to take. This isn't going to be a pill, or these days it's like, take this herb. It's not going to work. And so don't think it will. And we can skip that step.
Right. Yeah.
The pitta in me says, let's get to the bottom faster.
Exactly. Yep. And you are a proponent of small steps. It's like, it doesn't have to change overnight. Right. And in fact, that's part of the philosophy, right?
It does not have to change overnight. Your mind can change overnight, but the body will take some time. But the spirit is there the whole time. So that's really what you're dealing with is, do I have the spirit to heal? Do I have the intention and the will and authentic will to heal? And that is not something time bound. So yeah, it might, like you said, it might take time for changes to unfold, but the desire is there, and then you communicate with someone who's going to help you on that journey. But if you abandon that desire, that spirit, then you'll notice that what you're comfortable with will snap back into place very quickly. So you might spend 2 years trying to change everything, but then it's like, oh, I give up. And then bam, you're back in where you started, like lightning, because those grooves have already been created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You gentlemen like to use a phrase that is, we are all one.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you personally and for your clients?
Oh, that's my favorite. You just asked my favorite question.
All right.
So in Kundalini Yoga, it's Ekonkar. So obviously we cannot be one in the body. But okay, so what can merge? Well, the soul can merge. That's what can merge. Two can become one, right? And that's taught through every religion. Every religion has some talk about that, about us all merging into the oneness. You can call that the universal consciousness, the collective consciousness, the God consciousness. But they're all pointing in that direction, that the ultimate goal is to merge ourselves into the one consciousness. Well, so what are we waiting for? I don't get it. It's like, okay, let's go do it. I don't want to spend my day pointing out the differences between me and you, Kathy. I don't want to. I want to sit with you and talk about the similarities and how you and I can merge our consciousness and our souls, because I don't care about anything else. I don't care about the color of your skin, the sex of your body, the I just don't get why people are so obsessed with this stuff.
Well, because I don't like that guy.
Yeah, I don't like that guy.
Yeah.
I don't like that brother. I don't like that brother of mine who reflects exactly the parts of me I don't like. You know? So wouldn't it be beautiful, man? I mean, come on, we could do it. It's just a choice. We could all tomorrow just decide to treat each other truly like the brothers and sisters that we all love and cherish. We really should just adopt that old philosophy of treating each other like we want to get treated, as long as we want to treat ourselves well. Everybody keeps wanting to point out our differences. I don't want to. I want to point out our similarities. And genetically, we're all like 99.9% the same. There's
Something like that.
Genetically, there's like no difference between a man and a woman. There's like there is no genetic difference between skin colors, right?
It's like so minuscule that it's not, I mean, it's ridiculous.
I don't even think you can measure it or something crazy like that. And yet, we have a whole society based on those two things. Right? Our patriarchal culture over the matriarchal culture, a whole racism that we've been experiencing like crazy lately with all the shootings of these young black men and by our police officers and the Black Lives Matter movement. It's like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Of course they matter. Let's stop it. It's our brothers, man. You know? It's like it's just gotten, I don't know. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. It just seems too crazy for me right now. It's like, what happened to that spirit? I'm not saying we pulled it off in the 60s. Now everybody got lost in LSD and free sex, but
yeah, there were other distractions.
Yeah, too many
distractions in the mind.
Yeah, distractions in the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm cool with that. But, I'm just saying, like, why can't we get back to, come on, Dr. King, Mahatma Gandhi. We've, the whole Gloria Steinem and the whole feminist movement. Like, we've been here. Why are we going back? Why are we stuck again? We've already been here. We've already talked about stop the racism. We've already talked about stop viewing your sister as a sex object and all that. Like, come on, do we need to do this all over again? Can't we just say, yeah, okay, let's go? Like, we've had this conversation. It happened in the 60s and 70s. Why do we need to do it again?
Do you think that there's a potential for this being a wave of the next wave to come? So I was born in the 60s. I don't remember back then, but I do, in studying history, it seems like there was all of this horrible turnover. It's like somebody turned over the compost pile. We saw all this ugliness. And then when I came along, and my coming of age in the 70s, there was this sense of like, I had opportunities the generation before didn't. It feels to me like we're at that inflection point again. And perhaps we're seeing all this ugliness to get us to come together to do exactly what you're saying, Joe.
Yeah. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But I've never been a believer that you have to have ugly to appreciate beauty. Like, I'm not saying that isn't true. I'm all about the yin yang. But, I can walk out in nature and look up and go, wow, that's beautiful. I don't need to look at something ugly right before I do that, to get it.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Beauty is beauty, man, and I can, I know for sure from just like, when you feel close to somebody, like I played a lot of sports in my youth and stuff. And when, as a team, you win something, you go and you're in the locker room, you're hugging each other. Man, your body is just radiating with energy. It feels so good to have done that with other people, and you feel so close. It's like you couldn't feel any closer at those moments. It's like you love that person that you were on the team with, and it doesn't matter the color of their skin or anything like that. So I know we can experience. We don't have to feel pain to experience that pleasure of coming together. We don't have to. We may keep choosing to, but we don't have to. And like, I don't even know you, but I'm sure you and I could go out for lunch right now and have a great relationship. Why not?
Absolutely.
Like, why would we not have it? But that's not what people think. They think, well, I don't know you. Can I trust you? I can't be vulnerable in front of you. Okay, well, look at where it's gotten us. It's gotten us in this divided country where we all speak poorly of one another. So maybe that philosophy isn't right. Maybe we should learn to just trust and be vulnerable up front. And yeah, every once in a while you're going to get hurt. Like, okay, so what? Move on, keep going. But like, I don't think so. I think you and I could go have lunch and talk about anything we wanted. And I'll bet we'd come out of the lunch liking each other. So I don't think we're going to get hurt.
I'd take that bet.
So, yeah, I take that bet.
So we'd like to wrap up these episodes on an up note and share with the audience some things that are keeping you inspired, Joe. So is there anything that...
I'll put something out there to all your listeners on a different couple different podcasts, and I'm going to do it with this one because this really does uplift me. I can do yogic numerology. To all your listeners, if they want their yogic numerology done, I'll do it for free. Victor will give you the email. I need your birthday, your birth month, and your birth year, not your time. This is not astrology. This is numerology. If you'll send it to me in an email, I'll do your numerology and I'll give you like a little brief email response back. It'll be very general and all that stuff. If you want more specific, you'll have to ask me questions. I'll be happy to do that. I'm not putting a limit here, and I don't start charging money halfway through it or any goofy. This is not a come on. I've done about 40 in the last 2 weeks because of other podcasts, and I'm getting such a kick out of it that when you ask me that question, that's my answer. It's turning me on right now to do do total strangers numerology.
Okay. All right. That sounds wonderful. And then Victor, it's over to you then to tell people how to get in touch with you.
Okay. So www.ayurveda.com. That's the easiest way. All our contact information's there and so on and so forth. You can send an email to reception@iiayurveda.com for the numerology thing. We also just did it's also free. It's like a mini course that we put together on mantra and mudra. So if anyone was like, ooh, I want to start a mantra, mudra, and meditation practice, if that sparked anyone, then just email us and I'll send you the link to do it. Again, no cost. I'm not going to try and upsell you or anything like that. I mean, maybe I will later, but not for a long time, right? You'll forget. Yeah, you'll forget. So it's all good. And it's really easy to get a hold of us. We want to merge.
Yeah, we want to merge. We're really friendly. We're like really easygoing friendly.
And I got a lunch invitation, so it's all good.
Yeah, you got a lunch invitation.
Hey,
Don't think we're going to let you off the hook.
I'm a chef. Not only will you get lunch, I'll cook it for you.
Ooh.
All right, I'll tell you.
Look at that.
I'll tell you. I've got my van. I got to point my van westward. California,
Yeah, baby. Well, if you don't hurry up, you better point it elsewhere because I'm moving to Italy in about 6 months.
Different vehicle.
Different vehicle. But you're welcome to come and hang out with me. I'll be looking for some friends.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, gentlemen, I really enjoyed the conversation. I can't thank you enough for joining me. It is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.